So I'm going to talk to you about the Transforming Construction program, of which HIPER is a fantastic example. And it's an ambitious program that we're embarked on here. So I'll start with a quote from Buckminster Fuller, one of my heroes. You never change things by fighting existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And we're trying to apply that to an entire industry. It's an exciting and daunting prospect, but it's really encouraging to see where we've got to so far with it. So where do we start with this? Why transform construction? I think we all know that there's a hell of a lot that's wrong. I mean, having worked in the industry all my life, there's actually a hell of a lot I'm proud of as well. You know, you see something like Grenfell and it's terrible, and it just reminds you of just how much we need to do with the industry. But we've also produced fantastic buildings over the years. And at heart, I think you can characterize what's wrong with the industry as a focus on cheapness, not value. And it's paradoxical. You know, people think that by trying to drive prices down for everything, they're going to get better value, but you get the opposite. And that's why we've got this messy situation that we're all familiar with. This pie chart here, I guess, is familiar to everybody, but I think it's also worth really sort of ramming that home. There is 57% by many reckonings, and this feels right, 57% process waste in what we do. And that is such an opportunity to improve things, and we think we've got a model that really changes that. So where are we going to get to with this? I think we can achieve an industry that eliminates most of this waste and produces these beautiful sustainable buildings that we're all after. It needs to be based on relationships that are long-term and collaborative, and we see that sort of thing through Project 13 and the integration that we're seeing across a number of projects. Where value to clients and end users is the main driver of all decisions, and that's ultimate value, and I'll talk a little bit about that, more about that later on. And we're harnessing all the latest manufacturing techniques. So really doing what we dreamed of for years, what Egan dreamed of and so forth, which is transferring that know-how from other sectors, electronics, automotive and so forth, into our industry. Bringing the whole built environment to life and controlling it with sensors and systems that enable us to monitor and control things accurately, and obviously particularly important to the net zero challenge. And finally, to inspire people to come into our industry. You know, I think it's probably the case that we've all lived through many years of it being a little bit of a struggle to get the best and brightest to come into our industry. You know, I've loved working in this industry. I think it's the right place to be. I think if you're going to embrace and address the challenges that we face now, and I think that people are that much more conscious of now, this is the industry to be in. Get on with it, you know, find the solutions, apply the solutions. So my story is that I was Innovation Director at SKANSKA before this current role, and I saw this fantastic array of things that are out there to improve the industry, but also realised just how you've got to scale that. You've got to work collaboratively. Even a big company like SKANSKA can't do all that much by itself to change things. So, you know, this list of sort of the key innovations or the key techniques have so much potential to improve the industry. And I piloted some of these, and with support from Innovate UK, I did work on most of these items. One particular thing was flying factories, where we set up these temporary factories to build things in manufacturing approaches off-site. And again, the stats from that, you know, really prove the theory. You know, just how much waste you can take out of the system. At a stroke, you can double productivity by just doing some sensible things. So I have absolute confidence that these techniques can work if they're applied universally or on a big scale, and you get the industry on board with that. And another thing is the UK's strength. You know, I think there is, particularly I suppose in the light of Grenfell and so forth, there is a tendency to assume that the UK isn't that great with these things. But actually, I've seen construction operations around the world, and the UK is a leader in most aspects of construction technology. So we're starting from a pretty strong base here. So what have we got in terms of the Transforming Construction programme? Procurement based on lifetime value, modern methods of construction, and then sharing and scaling best practice across the industry. It was back in 2013 that the CLC and government got together to work out what they thought was feasible by 2025 in terms of targets for the industry. So fundamentally, these are the targets that we've been working towards. The lower emissions, I think the goalposts have moved on that in a positive direction, in the sense that we're, you know, that now is considered to be, you know, a target that is too low. You know, we've got to get, you know, the journey to net zero. The other targets, I think, you know, are still regarded as ambitious, but as I'll show through these slides here, through this talk here, I think we're well on the way to proving that all of those targets, and indeed improving on the lower emissions target, are feasible. And it's about working with these three elements, really. The research funding, the commitment and the buy-in from industry, and then the strong procurement pipeline, leveraging procurement. So you see here we've got the 170 million of government funding. When we launched this, when we negotiated the sector deal for construction, the industry committed to this 250 million of match funding. The latest stats that we've got, the data that we're collecting, are showing that actually we're nearer $1 billion in terms of industry investment in the activities that we're doing. So a ratio of something like 6 to 1 rather than 1.5 to 1 in terms of the match funding levels. It's a 4-year program. We are coming to the end of that 4 years next year, and I think on the basis of what we've achieved so far, it's a very, very strong case to continue to pump a bit of funding into this. I think using some public money is a great facilitator. As I say, we're leveraging this huge amount of private sector investment to go with it. But I think in terms of being a market enabler, I think that priming of grant funding is very important. And then that 50 billion there of procurement pipeline. I mean, you know, everybody who's in business knows that if the client demands it, you turn somersaults to achieve it. And the clients are demanding these changes, these better ways of doing things now. In terms of how we're split across the programme, Construction Innovation Hub is 72 million of the programme, and the Active Building Centre 36 million, and then 59 million for a collection of R&D and projects, collaborative R&D projects, of which HIPER is one. So at the heart of this new model is this platform approach that Michael's already referred to. And this is the best diagram for me that explains this. You define what the high-value outcomes are that you're after. You establish a rule set, an open source rule set, and that's really important. We're pushing towards this open rule set for the platform approach to encourage innovation across the piece, so that, you know, people aren't hoarding their own proprietary way of doing things. We want innovation around the fundamental building blocks of the built environment, but the interfaces need to be the same, so that these things fit together. From that comes the kit of parts. You need the configurator tools to configure all these things. In line with Hackett and the Grenfell report, the golden thread of information that proves that all of it is safe and high quality. And then the digital twin that we've all heard about, around knowing digitally modeling and optimizing everything through the life cycle of the building. So right from the design stage through the construction of the project, and then using the digital twin to optimize the actual operation and running of the asset. And already there are signs independently of us, as it were, that these approaches are being applied. Urban Splash got together with Sekisui, this massive Japanese house builder, and are essentially applying very successfully in the UK this sort of approach to buildings, this platform approach, really encompassing all those elements that I talked about there. So one of the key outputs from the Construction Innovation Hub is this value toolkit. So this is what facilitates the application of value-based decision-making in construction rather than cheapness that I talked about. And there is a model here, there's a tool set that's being piloted and consulted on at the moment. It's based on this 4 capitals model: produced capital, natural capital, social capital, human capital. And then the process takes you through the value definition and the risk profile and the procurement strategy and the appointment strategy for projects. So the expectation is that there will be practical tools that will be out there very, very shortly from the Construction Innovation Hub, and then that facilitation service to sort of hold organisations' hands through that. The Construction Innovation Hub is also on the way to producing the platform rulebook. So they are developing this kit of parts rule set for buildings, focusing on mid-span buildings which cover, you know, hospitals, schools, apartment blocks, offices, all these sorts of things. They've divided a building into, as it happens, 13 building elements. And they'll be producing a rule set which will be encouraging, I hope, innovation in the market and the maximum number of players to working into that system. In a sense, jumping the gun here, you've got Landsec and Easy Space and Bryden Wood working together to actually do that on a live building. So the photo here is called the Forge. It's an office building going up in South London, applying that approach. And again, encouraging findings from that. It really is working. Also in the housing sector, addressing the housing sector, we've got a big consortium involving Barratt's and L&Q and, goodness, I think it's about 40 other organisations that are involved in applying this same approach to the housing sector. And once again, you know, it's proving we're getting that critical mass, we're getting that momentum around it. The golden thread and the technologies associated with that are being pushed forward in various ways, and this is one of those. Lang O'Rourke and Trimble working together on these smart helmets that record everything that's going on, so you've got that digital record, you've got that proof of the quality, you've got access to information, and you've got the analytics behind that to help optimize the processes. Vital part of this whole equation is the race to net zero, and that's where the Active Building Centre particularly comes in. So the Active Building Centre is essentially developing tools to configure the best set of solutions for any given community or building around active building technology. Energy capture, energy storage, we'll hear more about that in relation to piles later on. And then the control systems to manage all those components in a building setting or in a community setting as you go forward. The active building controls is relating to having sensors on all that kit, collecting that data, and then being able to share and store and manage peaks and so forth across a community. And again, the thrust from my side is always about getting out of the lab, getting it out of the research centres and getting it into sort of practical, scalable implementation across the built environment. Retrofit, I should mention, is not a key part of our programme, but it certainly will be an important part of the transformation of the built environment going forward. And we're doing a certain amount on that at the moment. So a little bit on fabric solutions and the Active Building Centre helping to configure that. Applying the platform approach to sort of kit of parts retrofit solutions, really around energy pods and around sort of wrapping existing buildings to improve their insulation performance. And then the number of universities working together on the digital models of the whole built environment. They've got this fantastic system where essentially you do sort of drive-by surveys of houses, and then you use analytics to configure sort of mass solutions to retrofitting and upgrading these buildings. And I think incredibly they're on their way to having modelled all the housing in Wales with this. It's amazing that it can be that efficient. But I think the speed which we can apply retrofit will be quite stunning, and we need to do that as well in order to meet our obligations. But what's extraordinary, I think, is that we're really seeing how the solutions can work for this. Part of the output of the programme will be to take all this great work that we've done and make it accessible and practical to the wider industry, to players across the industry. And I'm not just talking about the converted here, but this huge range of organisations that work in the construction industry. So kind of behind the scenes, we're developing a taxonomy model and a user interface that will enable people to access the outputs from the programme and then apply them to their particular needs, depending on the kind of organisation that they are. From the client side, one of the main drivers, or possibly the primary driver, is this construction playbook that I hope a lot of people have heard of here. So this is the government saying how it will mandate its procurement of construction, and the mandation of these kind of principles that I've been talking about here. So no longer a nice to have, but actually say, this is how it will be done. We will demand manufacturing approaches to construction. We demand the use of digital techniques and so forth. And the work we're doing here will enable that to be delivered by the supply chain, we hope. And I'm also pleased to see that REBA are on board with regards to updating their plan to guide architects through this process. Skills is a really important part of this. So we're working with skills providers, the CITB, supply chain school and so forth, to propagate the skills. We create the knowledge fundamentally. There's a degree of sort of training the trainers that comes from us, but a vast range of organisations need to get involved in upskilling the workforce. So where we are at the moment is we've got this diverse portfolio addressing just about every building type out there. I've mentioned that what we're doing with homes and the AMCH project, working with schools and the DFE generally, offices, Landsec and other developers coming on board with that. And as identified earlier, about a 50 billion pipeline of applicable projects to this system. And as you'd expect from any government programme, we need to monitor very carefully what we're doing, prove that we're providing value for money for the taxpayer. And the data is very, very positive at the moment. So the red lines on these graphs are the targets, the promises we made, and the columns are showing what we're actually finding in terms of the investment by industry, in terms of the scope of cost reduction across the built environment, in terms of the uptake for active tech, and amazingly positive results also in terms of trade gap. So, we're finding that the organisations that we're invested with are coming back to us and saying there's a lot of interest in terms of exports for what they're coming up with. All this is associated with a major publicity campaign which is sort of ramping up. I mean, I hope that people have been seeing a lot of activity in the press. And Value Toolkit certainly got a lot of attention in the press. I hope that you're seeing articles in the trade press, a little bit in the national press and so forth. We're part of COP26, so I think there'll be a lot of visibility through COP26 as well around what we're doing. And the Active Building Centre will be this sort of significant national centre to enable the sort of long-term propagation of these results. Sorry about the busy slide, but it's got the sort of essential building blocks in there. Having the building projects, having the performance data from them, having the research centre where companies can come in and test their solutions, the configurator tools for all the tech that I mentioned, the education and training materials from that, and also the business models to show how these things can be financed and developed. So from all this, benefits for, I think, everybody. I mean, that's the amazing thing. This is not a compromised situation. The building owners, the building users, the industry, the operators, the environment, all benefiting from this new model approach. And, I talked about these targets early on. As I say, the data is really proving that these were not pie-in-the-sky targets. These are targets that we can really achieve. So it's a lovely place to be, really. And it's also a delight to be back again talking to a live audience. So thanks for having me, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.